Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the St Mary's Senatorial Hustings. This is an evening for the candidates, for them to get their policies over to you, to explain about themselves. I'm simply here to pass on the questions and to try and keep things to time if we can. The format that the candidates have agreed is that they will each have 3 minutes to make a speech, and we will give them a warning bell 20 seconds before the end of that time. We'll take 2 questions at a time. And at least to begin with, I'd like to take questions from parishioners, please. And the candidates will have a maximum of 2 minutes to reply to those 2 questions. And again, we'll give a warning bell 20 seconds before the end. Candidates will reply in the order they've been drawn out. Starting here, this is number 1. And a different candidate will start each time. I've been asked to point out by candidates that questions should be addressed to all the candidates to give them all a chance to answer. I would say to the candidates, this is not on the script, that I had a request from several parishioners to say, could they ask specific questions of specific candidates? I explained that that was entirely down to the candidates. What I propose to do is proceed as you have instructed. And then perhaps if we have a few minutes at the end where there isn't time to do a full round, we could see if there are any questions, and I'll ask the candidates at that time if they would be prepared to take them. Right, with no further ado, I will ask the first candidate to introduce him or herself, it's him in this case, of course, and to give me their 3-minute speech. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out tonight. Last night I had the pleasure of being in what was described as God's own parish of St Clement, where I couldn't help but remark it was interesting to see that God proceeded around St Clement's at a speed of 30 miles an hour. So it's interesting to come up here to God's own parish of St Mary and note that in St Mary God proceeds at an even more stately 20 miles an hour, generally speaking, when he's not reduced to 15. The main item that I want to put before you is the biggest problem we have in this island and the problem that has consistently failed to be tackled. I was quite shocked recently to discover that our population now is in the order of 103,000 people officially, and many people think it's actually practically a higher number than that. Now, you'll know that the state's government deals with all sorts of issues. You'll hear the candidates talking about various problems that we need to address. But the way I see it is actually very straightforward. The reason we have more cars on the road, the reason our public services are under pressure, the reason we have to build more primary schools, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, you are being asked in short order to pay more tax than you're used to be paying, although cleverly these are now described as charges, is actually down to this one fundamental problem. We, for many years, have been trying to squeeze a quart into a pint pot, and it doesn't work. I can remember the figures being laid down. We should cap the population at 80,000. Then it was 85,000. The figures kept going up, and we now are at the latest number, coupled with the fact there appears to be no coherent population policy operated by this government whatsoever. We really have to crack down on this issue straight away, because if we don't, the population will keep continuing to grow. And immigration itself is not the only element to this, although those matters will be dealt with over the next few years by the United Kingdom government, who, of course, is changing its own position on immigration. We're actually going to have to consider a level of social engineering within this island. We're going to have to look at a number of areas, not least of which will be child welfare and to what extent we keep encouraging families to have children. Because the more children we have, we end up by, they grow up, they require all the benefits right up to and beyond tertiary education, and then those that wish to come live in the island, we will have to find homes for them. I know very few people who want their children to carry on living with them over the age of 40. Or whenever. I'm happy to hit the ground running. I have numerous projects that I already have Oh, sorry. Well, that was a quick 20 seconds there. Anyway, I'm Guy DeFay. Thank you for your attention.
Good evening, I'm Christian May. It's a pleasure to be here in St Mary. I'm certain the fantastic dinner dance and the family fun day this weekend will probably be the highlight of the parish's week, but I'm sure we'll try to be informative, if not as entertaining. I was born and educated in Jersey before qualifying as an English barrister, and I spent the last 10 years working in a local law firm. I've had the privilege of chairing the local equality charity. I'm an invited governor of Rouge Bouillon School, and I founded the West of Town Community Association. I also had the privilege of leading the Save People's Park campaign, bringing together members of the public, campaigners and states members across the political spectrum to save the park. I'll bring that same success from business and the community to my work within the States Assembly. I believe the States needs a new candidate who hasn't had the opportunity to bring their ability, their skills and their perspective to the States Chamber. I'll be a fresh pair of eyes with a fresh perspective. I've made 10 pledges in my manifesto. They're aspirational but achievable and represent a real commitment to the island across the next 2 years, and I'm ready and willing to be measured against them. I want to ensure all island students have access to funds so they can go to university. I want to challenge draconian measures in our health law, and I want to make sure we're using the best of states' assets rather than raising taxes. I want our island culture celebrated and protected. I want to ensure we're prepared for changing environmental factors and want to use the digital industry to give everyone online access to our elections. Tomorrow is a particularly important day for Island students as they receive their AS and A-level results, and I wish them the very best. And I want to ensure that we are getting the best education possible for our students, that we are transparent about the level of achievement across all island schools, and we're matching or exceeding the results in England. Over the last 10 years, Jersey's academic performance has plateaued, and those aren't my words, those are words taken directly from the MTFP, and that's something we've got to address. We need to continue to recruit and employ the best quality teachers who are well paid. We need to carefully consider which systems of testing we're using. Some favour PISA, and some find it overly dogmatic, and I'm open to discussion on that as long as we have transparency, as the scrutiny panel have asked for since 2011. I also think we need broader development in citizenship, voting and communication skills. Some people say one voice can't achieve anything in the States Assembly. I don't believe that's true. One voice can make a difference, and I would like to be that voice for you. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Young. The new senator will have just 20 months before the next general election. My experience in the private, public and voluntary sectors will enable me also to hit the ground running. I know what works in the States as a former States Deputy. During my 3 years, I brought 21 private members' propositions and amendments. Half of those were approved. I lodged 119 questions, and I held ministers to account as chairman of a scrutiny panel. Now, unfortunately, our Council of Ministers now has become out of touch with the public. There almost seems to be a kind of bunker mentality, where decisions are defended, have to be defended at any price. And I think this has contributed to the public losing confidence in government. And so we need a new direction. And I believe I can offer that direction. But my challenge is not just about style. Public spending is not under control. And I think we're seeing the wrong people being hit by the cuts. Gardeners, cleaners, frontline workers. Voluntary redundancy means losing some of our best people. We've seen the £5 million in the hospital saga. And there is no sign of the promised review of our tax system. And yet what's happening? The tax is being increased for Middle Jersey. And without a mandate, the Council of Ministers are proposing so-called charges, which are effectively tax increases in disguise. And they haven't made the progress that they promised here in reforming 010 to tax the profits of non-resident corporations who trade locally, disadvantaging local businesses. And our young working families have suffered by the reduced for their support, their childcare and pensioners' benefits. And immigration, well, the figures show they've given up. And what we see instead is building on open spaces and promoting dense town-cramming housing developments, which is damaging, I believe, to the whole island, not just the town life. And as far as spending, we're still structured into silos in departments in states' finances. That rules. For decades, chief officers have defended empires, layers of management cost on their frontline services, and when the cuts come, where does it happen? Frontline services year after year after year, and the recent PAC report proved that. And we can't afford, I don't believe, pensions, golf trips. We have to freeze those increases and halt new charges until our house is in order. If elected, I will bring proposals to require ministers to rethink, and I've run out of time, I've no extra grind, but I will work for you.
Thank you, friends, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sam MEZEC, and I've been the Deputy for St Helier No. 2 for the past 2.5 years now. During the 2014 general election, ministers stood on these hustings platforms around the island and told you that our public finances were the envy of the world, and that if they were elected, they would promise to keep taxes low and that they'd rein in wasteful spending. The Treasury Minister, Alan McLean, even said, and I've got the quote, "I want to see the cost of government controlled rather than tax rises that hurt everyone." And he repeated this throughout the whole campaign, as did the rest of his ministerial colleagues. Now, looking back at that now and knowing what we know in that almost 2 years since that election, I think it's impossible to arrive at any conclusion other than this. And that is that you were lied to, and I believe it really is as simple as that. Because just weeks after they were elected, we found out that actually they'd racked up a public spending deficit of £145 million, and straight away they began drafting their plans to cut public services and to introduce new taxes, all of which they'd actually pledged to be against. In the past year, we've seen £10 million of support cut from people with disabilities, from broken families, and from pensioners, despite the revelations we've had since then about the shocking statistics of the proportion of pensioners we have in Jersey living in relative low income. All whilst this happens, it feels like it's literally every week that we get a new story about the out-of-control spending of senior civil servants and consultants on themselves, and report after report tells us that ministers are too beholden to their chief executives and are not focusing their efficiency savings at bloated management levels. And instead, they're asking us all to pay the price for their mistakes. They plan to introduce a new health tax with exemptions for the very wealthiest islanders so that they won't have to pay the full rate that you will. They plan on sacking hundreds of our frontline workers who are providing brilliant services to the public whilst leaving that bloated management level completely unscathed. And they plan on slashing pay for newly qualified teachers whilst at the same time somehow expecting that to increase standards in education. But worst of all, if you speak to ministers privately, they will all tell you they know that they're not going to hit their targets on deficit reduction. So I think the timing of this by-election is perfect because it offers you an opportunity to cast a verdict on the performance of the Council of Ministers before they go ahead with the next phase of these plans. And I'm standing in this by-election because I want to seek a mandate from the whole island, not just St Helier, for an alternative vision to the one being proposed by the Council of Ministers. That's a vision based on fair taxation, protecting our public services, and ending the civil service gravy train, which is bleeding this island dry. I think my record shows that I'm not afraid to stand up to the Council of Ministers, and if I'm elected, it will show that the public have lost support in them and that they must change direction. If you support that aim, please give me your vote on the 7th of September. Thank you very much.
Good evening, St Mary's. Can I first of all start? It was a pleasure on Thursday and Friday to see St Mary's put in a junior float. It was very much appreciated, and I'll come on to that in a moment. However, I'm not here really to discuss about Battle, but it was good to see St Mary's in. I'm Hugh Raymond. Some of you I know in this room, and some of you will know me. I'm president of the Honorary Police Association. I'm chairman of the Sports Council. I sit on the Advisory Council with regards to funding for sport, and I'm also was selected or was asked to sit on the Battle of Flowers board at the beginning of this year. And I have to say, it was a pleasure to sit on that board, and I hear from the grapevine that yourselves are thinking about putting in a big float for next year, and we'd be delighted to see you. However, I have to try and sell my position to become a senator. I think the most important factor about any of the parishes is that you play such an important part in the run-up to this election. The other thing is that people tend to forget. I think they keep comparing. We spent the last two hustings down in, let's say, the urban areas. But I was looking through your fact finder with regards to St Mary's. You have 33 businesses here. You're employing staff in St Mary's. You have some very successful businesses here, and it's important that we keep. However, this island, over the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years, is overspent. And there's going to be some serious questions asked with regards to the medium-term plan over the next couple of months, which is going to see all of us affected. All jurisdictions, countries in Europe, everybody is overspent. But I think the essential thing is that when you're working through what we're trying to achieve, we still have to make sure that we keep education, health, taxation, job security, immigration, and the elderly, as well as housing. We're all getting older. The population in this island is getting older. The number of people paying money at the bottom end is not going to be sufficient to keep the elderly going. So it's important that we make sure that the person that's selected asks the right questions in the right places at the right time. I think it would be foolish for anybody in this room to say that they're going to change the pattern. We've got 2 years before the next general election. We have to be able to stand up and ask those questions which become relevant to everybody in this room. St Mary's, St John's, it doesn't matter what parish. I think I'm the right person. I have the position within the volunteer sector, and this island, again, one of the most pluses to this island, it runs on volunteers. I've had 25 years in the finance sector, and I think that I am the right person to go forward. It would be great to see, and it's a desire for me, to bring the envy of all islands, to bring this jurisdiction back as to the number one. In my views, it's your island, it's my island, but at the end of the day, it's our island. Thank you.
Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to try something first of all, because I'm well over 6 foot, so I don't know if by standing up, and I'm not disrespecting anybody, that you'll be able to hear me. So we're going to try this and see what happens. Right, can everybody hear me? Are you sure? I can't hear myself, actually. Right, good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for coming. My name is Stevie Ocean. I am the establishment candidate and truly a man of the people of this island. Our island is 45 square miles, and we already have a population of over 102,000. Now, how do we solve this? We could actually reclaim land from the sea. But if we do that, I mean, what are the environmental hazards that we face? More sea lettuce or even worse? We've got to get the situation under control here. And with services under pressure, and our schools and the police force having 400 residents to one police officer, because that's the way it works on per capita. Basically, we are in a situation where we have to look at an immigration policy and formulate the situation entirely. The 5-year rule and work permits have to remain. And the protection of the other side of things here, sorry about this, because it's gone off here, I'm sorry. Right, I mean, for people who want to make Jersey their home, and they come to this island and they put a lot of effort in, and consequently also what they do is they contribute in the way that they should. And we're not stopping anybody actually coming to the island in that respect. And basically, I mean, the whole thing about this, that people are lucky to be born here. I mean, I wasn't, unfortunately, but basically that, you know, looking at the whole thing in retrospect, that we have to get an immigration policy. Once we get an immigration policy, we can then work out the parameters of what we do with it. And until then, we're on a piecemeal situation and we can't seem to sort this thing out. And this is what gets confusing. Now, recently, I wrote to Google in the United States to have the UK removed from Google Maps, which they did. Now, this was actually to prevent a possible situation with terrorists, and also from the point of view of using the UK, of these people using the UK as a backdoor to this island. Now, trying to sort this out and managing to sort this out, because it comes into the situation with people trying to come into this island illegally, and nobody is going to come into this island illegally for the simple reason that they're not going to find that this place is going to welcome them. Okay? Vote for me on the 7th of September. I'm sorry about that, but basically, thank you very much. That's all right, bloody...
Okay. Good evening, St Mary's. Lovely to be out here this evening. I'm a centenaire, a businesswoman, a non-exec director and a mother. I believe in positive politics with drive and ambition for Jersey. This evening, you are going to hear a lot of moaning and groaning, but not from me. I believe in getting the job done. There are leaflets on your chairs with some of my action plans, and there are more details on my website, www.mary.je. On Monday, I mentioned my legit strategies. These are law, equality, good housekeeping, immigration, and tourism with trade. And last night, I focused on law. And this evening, I'd like to focus on equality. 1, what we mean by equality. 2, equality of opportunity. And 3, why equality matters. Equality is about fairness. That is equal treatment and equal opportunity. It is not right or fair when people are discriminated against because of where they come from, or what they believe in, or the colour of their skin, being male or female, or their sexual orientation. It is not right or fair when opportunities open to people are not based on 1, their ambition, 2, their ability, and 3, hard work. Now, equality of opportunity, there is a gap between those on low incomes and high incomes in Jersey. But you do not improve the lives of those at the bottom by limiting the ambitions and opportunities of others. Instead, we need to design intelligent policies and give those at the bottom a real opportunity to make a better lives for themselves. And why equality matters. We can all agree on our ultimate aim of a better society, but I want to explain why equality of opportunity and equal treatment will help us achieve a better society. And I think there are 3 main reasons. 1, moral, 2, social, and 3, economic. Morally, everyone agree that people have a right to be treated equally and to live their lives free from discrimination. Anyone who has ever been on the receiving end of discrimination knows how painful and hurtful and damaging it can be, and why we should seek to eliminate it from our society. And anyone who's ever witnessed discrimination would want to stamp it out. Socially, equality is not just important to us as individuals, it's essential to our well-being as a society. Strong communities are the ones where everyone feels like they've got a voice and can make a difference, and St Mary's is no exception. Economically, equality of opportunity is vital to our prosperity. It is central to building a strong, modern economy that benefits the talents of all its members. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 8 senatorial seats, 7 are taken by men, and I'd like the last one to be taken by a woman. So please vote for me. Thank you very much.
Yes, hello there. I'm Mike Dunn. On 23rd of June, the United Kingdom voted for Brexit to leave the European Union. We in Jersey had no voice in that decision. The UK has just 2 years to draft new deals with the European countries, other places, including Jersey. This senatorial vacancy allows me to offer my services as an elected representative representative for that same 2-year period only. I've had 50 years of experience as a political campaigner and do not need training, nor am I seeking a cosy new career at public expense. If elected, I will speak with and for the public of Jersey, in and outside of government, in Jersey and beyond, stimulating and organising discussion and negotiations as needed, besides challenging government policies and secrecy where necessary on Brexit. The importance of Brexit to Jersey must not be underestimated. However, if elected, I will still carry out all all-island duties to the electorate within the States. Brexit raises a catalogue of new problems. We are all involved. Nationality, passports, immigration, right to work and housing, farming and fishing, travel, international standards and agreements are just some of the matters that must be resolved. As we all know, the UK government collapsed immediately after the Brexit decision. The political shockwaves around Britain and worldwide have been enormous, with financial and business markets severely shaken. Many small British overseas territories, as well as Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man, face an uncertain future because so many have finance centre-based economies, and these are vulnerable to a hostile world, especially since the Panama Papers exposures and the anti-corruption conference in London. Our relationship with the European Union is based upon an outdated Protocol 3 arrangement from 1973, which Senator Balash, our official negotiator, hopes will remain. But this must be unlikely. On the 27th of July, Senator Balash said before scrutiny that the Brexit decision was off the earthquake scale, but that Jersey has been planning for it for 2 or 3 years. He did not rule out independence as an option and actually proposed a monetary authority for Jersey and a commission to appoint judicial officers. He didn't explain much about it. Why? There can be no secrecy in the process of renegotiations of terms. We, the public, must participate fully in any deals made. The views of the whole population must be considered, not just the needs of the finance sector. Farming in Jersey, for example, is already a precarious activity with many problems ahead, but Brexit could be the final blow for many growers. And what then will happen to them and their land? There was already a queue of landowners seeking to develop their land during the last island plan negotiations. Brown cows and green fields may well look good in the tourism brochures and provide an attractive backdrop, but can this survive after Brexit? Such unpleasant questions need to be asked as soon as possible, and during the next 2 years, I'm offering to do that and more. Please read the leaflets and look on my blogs. Thank you.
Good evening. I was reading my literature from 2014 the other day. Nothing has changed except the deficit is now 145 million instead of 100 million. Meanwhile, the fiscal policy panel say, don't increase taxes. So what happens? We get stealth taxes masquerading as charges for health, hospital, liquid waste, solid waste, long-term care, and the proposed community infrastructure charge. I have no idea what that is. Before 010, those people paying tax at 20% paid more than 50% of the income tax revenues collected. Today, those paying tax in the marginal rate pay over 50% of the income tax collected. In other words, Middle Jersey is carrying the bulk of the tax collected. And these so-called charges are going to hit the lower income and Middle Jersey hardest. The medium-term finance plan, which is giving authority for the charges, is being debated shortly after the election. There is time to bring an amendment to the plan that no charges should be implemented until there is an independent review of tax, including 010. And as I've been saying for the last 2 years, 010 has turned out to be an incredible on-island tax avoidance scheme. High earners place part of their earnings into a company and don't pay tax unless they withdraw them. A trading company can retain its profits, and when a shareholder retires, shares are sold, and bingo, profits become capital and are not taxed. Meanwhile, we need to find brownfield sites in the parishes so that we can build affordable housing for the young, but not rabbit hutch-sized. If we don't, then the parishes will just wither and die. The charges being proposed, like the solid waste charges, are moving the work of the parishes to central government. This undermines the parish system. We had the fracas last year over the central account for the rates. You know, what else have they got in store? This session will be short, but it's possible to make a difference through scrutiny, questions in the Assembly, and submission of propositions and amendments. Please remember, your vote is your voice. Please use it, preferably to vote Sarah Ferguson, but you must use it. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Nicola CORNU. I knew I'd arrived in St Mary's because it announced itself to me. I hit the speed bumps and my suspension shuddered. I'm standing as an anti-austerity and anti-racist candidate in the interest of working people, pensioners and the poor. For over 20 years I've been campaigning for social justice in the island. I'm a former deputy. I was elected in District Number 1, St Helier in 2014. And as a lawyer, I provide my services free to employees before the Employment Tribunal. And I'm very proud to have brought the first race discrimination case under the new discrimination law. Now, inequality in Jersey is rising. The Council of Ministers' austerity policies are polarising society. Because facing structural deficits, they vainly seek to balance budgets by cutting public services, cutting jobs, and raising taxes on low and middle income earners. It's the failure of the 0-10 policy. The old low tax, low spend model is broken. And taxation has been shifted deliberately from companies to those on salaries and wages. We need progressive income tax and a way to tax companies once again. And there has to be thoughts about real diversification of the economy. Brexit means profound changes to the constitutional relationship between Jersey and the United Kingdom. We have to ensure that the public is involved in that whole process, because we know what's going to happen. The elites will take it from us and they'll make the decisions because that's the way they operate. But we've got to ensure we're consulted and we're involved. And it's important that all EU citizens already in Jersey have their rights extended in relation to work and residency. It's very important that they're protected. Now, I've always said democracy in Jersey is broken when 70% of electors abstain from voting at general elections. There really is something rotten in the state of Denmark, and that is the evidence. People do not vote. And who's not voting? It's the working class. I was with them today. I was in the area of Ann Street, and I went to Dyketful Court. It was very interesting to see that of that, only 10% was registered. It was appalling. It was dreadful. And those people are definitely not going to be voting. But I would say to working people, if we're going to end austerity, you're going to have to vote for candidates who are going to fight it. I will do so. Thank you.
Thank you to all the candidates for their introductory speeches. So now we move to questions. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm looking for 2 questions at a time, and initially from parishioners, please. Put your hand up if you're interested in asking a question. Mrs. Harris. There's a microphone coming. Oh, there you go.
I'm interested in specifics, not general ideals. And I would like to know what specific goal you intend to pursue vigorously over the next 20 months in hoping to achieve it, and exactly how you are going to do that.
Thank you. And is there someone else who'd like to pair that question up, please? Do we have another question? Well, candidates, are you happy to proceed with one whilst the audience think of their next? Oh, okay. Brian, please.
It seems that one of the traditions of the island of Jersey is a fairly close relationship between the church and the states. For instance, we have the Dean sitting in the States, which gives us a close relationship between the parish church and the parishes. I wonder how you as candidates would see, or what's your opinion on the view that about that closeness of working between the Church of England in Jersey and the States, and how do you see the future relationship between the Church and society in Jersey?
Thank you. Two very different questions, but nonetheless, I'm sure the candidates are up to the task. We'll start, please, with candidate number 1, Mr. DeFay.
Well, I wish I had the time to go into detail about specific goals, but a number of things I already have a proposition pretty well worked out where I think I can actually provide a sensible solution to the grim morning traffic congestion in this island. It requires a little bit of lateral thinking, but all the details are on my website if anyone is interested in see what might be possible. I'm also very concerned about how we run our public utilities. It has struck me over the years that the regular routine of companies owned by the people of this island, but actually administered by a board of directors with arm's length control from the Treasury Department and the Minister, who every year then hand over a big cheque to the states, which I then have to say, in many people's view, is simply often wasted amongst a whole lot of other state spending. This needs review in my estimation. For example, would it have not been quite a better idea during a time of austerity, but it's been with us since 2008, if people who own the companies might have had cheaper telephone call and data charges, cheaper electricity, rather than seeing these fact checks go into the Treasury Department, and every so often the Treasury Minister announces that he's found some more money down the back of the sofa. That needs to be looked at and I think can be resolved positively. I have a cunning scheme to end all stamp duty on property purchases and a whole lot else besides. Regrettably, a minute isn't really long enough to tell you all about it. Church and state, we will probably have to say goodbye to the Dean, I think, because otherwise a whole lot of other religions will be going, why is there only one religious representative in the States?
Thank you. Mr. May.
When it comes to specifics, I've set out 10 clear goals within my manifesto, and they are my aims across the next 2 years. I won't go into detail on all of them, but perhaps pick 3 that I can look at. The first is funding university education for students over here. We've got such a responsibility to our students to make sure that any person who wants to go to university has that opportunity. I've already been speaking to the campaign groups, I've been speaking to some private enterprise and banks, I've arranged to speak with the education department. I think only by working effectively together and bringing groups together can we actually make a difference and ensure that the students are getting the support they need. It's been proved that you can do it. We achieved it with Save People's Park by talking to campaign groups, talking to the politicians. Other perspectives I've had, I've spoken to Digital Jersey, I've spoken to the eGov team, and I would really like to ensure that we have digital registration for elections and hopefully digital voting by the time of the next election. It's aspirational, but I think by working together, again, that can be achieved. When it comes to the position of the churches, I've got huge respect for people of faith. I went to De La Salle and I'm a Roman Catholic myself. I think that the Dean's role probably will change and he will step out of the States Assembly. But within the parishes, people of faith and the church will always provide moral support and provide that community support that I think is essential and is a well respected and a well needed part of our parish community. So I would never want to see that disappear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Young.
Thank you for the questions. And on specifics, I've listed in my manifesto the particular commitments I want to do. Certainly, I think a proposition to the states before the medium-term financial plan to place a freeze on those new charges and taxes until we've had the tax review, which the states themselves decided we should have 2 years ago and have done nothing, and that includes a review of 010. Obviously, as a backbench member, there are no ministerial positions. The person appointed will have to use the system that's there, with propositions, amendments, questions, and of course the only opportunity is ministerial steering groups, if you can persuade ministers to put you on it, because there's no system to join. And incidentally, I brought propositions to put that right, but that's another story. Housing, St Helier. It seems odd that this beautiful environment of St Mary is obviously so important to keep it that way, but things are not good in town. The urban areas have got serious problems, and we are town cramming, and there has to be an overall approach to St Helier and town urban development. That means getting involved, stuck in the detail of the town planning system and the minister, trying to make sure that what we end up, this town is a good place to live, because otherwise we will see St Mary and other places see sprawling development, which I think would be a shame. We can find brownfield sites, but that's a lot of work to do there. Those are just two of my manifestos there. That details those, and I'll take every opportunity. Church and state. Well, I don't belong to any denomination, but I absolutely appreciate the value of faith groups in Jersey. Really, really important. It's always worried me that the only body that's represented is the Church of England and the parish churches, and yet the other bodies have to raise and support their own funds. And I know, for example, from people who've come to me about redundant churches, how they feel about that they feel that there should be some equalisation. But nonetheless, it's not, for me, a priority. I think the priority in the next 20 months are those two key things, and the things I've pointed out in my manifesto. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr MEZEC.
Mrs Harris, on a specific goal, my major goal, if I'm successful in this election, is that I want to stop the health tax from going through. They say it's going to start at 1%. We all know it will not stay at 1%. It'll be the same story as GST. When they realise that they're not able to achieve their deficit reduction plans, it'll be a matter of time before it's 3%, 5%. If it's to fund our entire health budget, it actually needs to be 14%. So my goal is to stop that. In the next few weeks, I'm going to lodge an amendment to the medium-term financial plan. I'm sort of just going through and crossing the T's and dotting the I's at the moment, where we will stop the health tax and we will replace it by lifting the cap on social security contributions, which is something that I think is regressive and unfair. If I'm successful in this election, I can stand on the senatorial benches and say the public have supported me here, and I can look across to the other states members and say the public have issued their verdict here. Listen to them, listen to the public like they did with People's Park and like they have on occasion done, and that's my main reason for standing in this election, because I do believe that we can stop these charges, and that's how I propose going about it. In terms of the relationship between the church and state, I should declare that I'm a half Anglican, half Catholic atheist. I have a huge admiration for the teachings of Christianity. Jesus said, love thy neighbour, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and sooner will a camel pass through a needle's eye than a rich man enter the kingdom of God. I think those are things that are a fundamental part of my political philosophy, and I always bear those in mind when I'm voting on issues in the States. I have an excellent relationship with the Dean of Jersey. We work together on the living wage campaign here. St Thomas's Church is in my constituency. I'm down there almost every week meeting people down there, and Reverend Graham Halls from the Methodist Church signed my nomination paper, but I staunchly believe that nobody should sit in the States Assembly without being elected. That goes to the Dean, the Attorney General, the Bailiff. You should only have a seat in the States if you've got a big mandate from the public. So unfortunately that means taking the Dean out of the States. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Raymond, please.
Thank you, Mrs Harrison. The question is relevant to every parish. One of the things that is going to be discussed in great detail with regards to the medium-term plan, is the policing of the island. And there are some major cuts coming into that particular area. This has a knock-on effect with regards to the honorary police in all the parishes. And we're under discussions at the moment, and I think from being inside the chamber, I will be able to bring exactly what is going on. I think what has happened with the honorary police over the last 3 or 4 years, instead of people being self-employed, they're now more employed, and we've got to make sure that we give the support to the police There is a lot more going on in the island, and there's a lot more that we have to be conscious of, with Europe as it is at the present time, with the safety of this island, and it has to be an essential part of anybody's brief to make sure that this island is safe for all the parishioners across the island. And that would be my goal. There's one other secondary goal, and that is I have a family, one of which is my son is just in the process of purchasing a first-time purchase a house. And for goodness sake, we've got to make sure that we've got housing stock ready for those people to be able to afford it. And with my background from the UK in building societies, there is a lot that I can bring to that. Going back to the church is very much a traditional part of this island. There's all segments to it. And I think that the church plays such an important role with everybody. And I agree with what Sam has just said with the different denominations. I think everybody has to play its part. And as we get older, we want more comfort, and the church tends to provide that comfort. And I would love to see it go, to keep it going. And I think the dean should stay, actually, for the time being, unless somebody comes up with a better proposition, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Ocean, please.
Thank you. Well, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, please beg my indulgence. I'm going to remain seated. I couldn't hear a thing. You heard me. I couldn't hear anything at all, and that's not the excuse, it's a fact. Anyway, on the point of what I would do, with myself, you will get a team player with a safe pair of hands. My intention would be to work with the Council of Ministers and use diplomacy and tact to achieve an immigration policy, because that is one thing that we do need, and we need it now, and not next week or the week after, now. On the church front, basically, I'm Jewish, I'm a non-practicing Jew. I wasn't bar mitzvahed. I've been in churches more than I've ever been in a synagogue. I think I've been in a synagogue once in my life. And I can't really make a comment on that, but I do think that Reverend Bob Key plays an important part from the religious point of view in the state of Jersey. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. O'Keefe-Berger, please.
Thank you. I'm part of the parish of St. Saviour, and I'm an active centeneer, and I see the link between the church and the parish, and I don't think I would have quite appreciated that had I not been as involved now as I am in the parish. And now that I am in that position, I actually think that the link is very important. Our rector comes in and sees us regularly. We have chats with him. We attend services. Our parishioners have funerals. As an honorary, we attend the funerals, and we like to give our parishioners and our staff, if they have a funeral or a wedding, we want to give them something very special. And the church is the most important link in that occasion. And as I say, not everybody can maybe appreciate that. So I certainly would be keen to keep everything as it is. It's been a system for a long time now, and I would have no reason to change it. And Ms. Harris, if we come on to your question, another good question. I have a number of things that I'd like to do, and I know I'll be able to start doing them immediately should I get elected. One of the reasons that I am standing, and I spoke about this last night, is as my role as a centeneer, I have seen people in distress in front of me, and I have felt that they were depressed and they needed help. However, when I asked them should they go to see a doctor, the reply has come back to me on numerous occasions that they can't afford to see the doctor. Now, I feel that this is very wrong. So what I would like is for lawyers, police officers and centeneers to be able to refer patients in distress directly to the mental health services. And that would be one of my top priorities that I'd be working on straight away. Oh, I've got lots of others as well. Sorry, but time doesn't allow.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn.
Yes, insofar as my Brexit activity is concerned, which will be the main part, I would be, the first 6 months, I would be setting up a Brexit group for anybody who wants to join, general public, states members. So we've got so once we've got an active group, we can, and during that 6 months, I will be contacting the other islands, Guernsey, the Isle of Man, and finding out what their feelings are about what they want to do. If there's any groups there, I shall be contacting the Chief Minister here, the Senator Balash, and see if he wants to come along and meet our group, assuming I manage to get one together. I shall then be contacting there's a parliamentary group, an all members parliamentary group in London with the Channel Islands. I shall be contacting them. I should be contacting the Friends of the Overseas Territories and to see if they want to have any contact with us and see what they're proposing to do about Brexit. So the first 6 months is to consolidate knowledge, to gain knowledge, to find out what's happening. By then, hopefully, the UK government will have sorted its act out and they will know in what direction they're proposing to go. And then we can start doing some proper, serious negotiations, discussions with the public here, with the government here, with the governments elsewhere, wherever they might be. We might even speak to the French, who knows. But we want to try and sort out what we want to do. We don't want to go down this corridor to inevitable independence by a decision made by somebody else. If that's where we're heading, we'll go to. But the 6 months starting, find out what people, set up a group, and then we can find out what's possible, what's not possible. As regards the Dean, I don't think he should be in the States. I appreciate the problem with regards to the structures of fabrics of churches. They're expensive. I wouldn't like to see them not being supported financially in some way. But there are other things about, I have no faith of my own, but I think it's wrong that the Anglican Church is dominant. And I would stop all swearing of oaths, Christian oaths, wherever they are, in the court, in the States, these sort of things. I would remove that element of the church from the state.
Thank you. Ms Ferguson, please.
Fascinating. Actually, on Brexit, I think the first person I'd get will be Lord Lawson. Tax reform, like half the candidates here, Mrs Harris, I would be wanting an amendment to the MTFP to put a hold on the charges because they're just increases in tax and it's grossly unfair. I want to simplify tax and restore the fairness to the system. That's one of the streams of work that I will be working on. I probably will end up being the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel to, give them a hand, but that's life. The average tax paid is 15%. So my inquiries suggest that 15% would possibly be a good flat rate that we could have, simplify the whole system, have a flat rate, but that's a bit more long term. The programme of reform is my other interest. It's been hitting the frontline staff. The savings programme cannot say what is the improvement in services in terms of customers' treatment or throughput, or what is an improvement in the outcomes. So if you're looking at something in the hospital, they can't tell you if the patients are going through more quickly and recovering better. All they can tell you is they've saved £160,000, which is absolutely no use at all. The relationship between the church and the state, well, actually, it's between the parish and the state, and we've got a special relationship with the monarch, who is actually head of the church, so that it makes a lot of sense for the Church of England to be an integral part of parish life and part of our loyalties. And because of that, the parish supports the maintenance of the church. And I think that's absolutely right. I'm actually a Methodist, but that's okay. Charles Wesley was the Church of England vicar.
Thank you. And finally, for that round of questioning, can we have Mr. Cornue, please?
As a backbencher, it's difficult to change government policy, but of course that doesn't mean one shouldn't try, for example, the austerity policies and so on. But something practical that a backbencher does have is the right to initiate legislation, to bring a proposition. And the one I do is to import 2 sections of the Employment Rights Act in the United Kingdom to protect waiters and waitresses. Because I brought a case recently and it's clear that Jersey legislation is deficient. Workers are not protected. This particular waiter, half his wages were his tips were being taken by the employer and recycled into the business. And the reason for that is because there isn't protective legislation to prevent that. In the UK, it's used by a number of chain restaurants who take employees' tips, and they achieve it because they've got it in the contract, and there's no way around that. But this particular waiter wasn't subject to contractual relations in that way. As a consequence, he was earning something like £6,000 a year in tips, and half of it was going back to the company I'd like to bring legislation that would definitely prevent that. As to the state and the church, well, I think that the dean should be removed as part of the general reform of the State's Assembly. It's long overdue. It was done just after the war. It needs to be looked at again. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Well, we've had two very different questions there. Can I have two more, please? Who'd like to ask the next one? Mr. Drew, please.
After all these big island-changing questions, I have an embarrassingly small, specific question. I'd like to invite you to give a small and specific answer. Figures available to the police show that on, for example, La Verte Rue, running in front of the parish here, 12% of vehicles, that's 1 in every 8 vehicles, is travelling at over 40 miles an hour. It's a 20-mile-an-hour road. The police have done their best and cannot change motorist practices. There is, however, a solution available: speed cameras. The minister responsible was invited to look at it, and some 18 months ago she was going to trot off to England and get consultation advice. There we stand. Would you, as a backbencher, bring a proposition to introduce a change in the law to enable speed cameras to be used, or do you, like her, not really care about speeding? Thank you.
Thank you. And who'd like to pair up a question with that one? There's no one from St Mary's. Is there a visiting parishioner here who'd like to do that? Oh.
Hello.
I'd like to parishioner.
I am a parishioner, actually. What do the candidates think about the Advance to Work scheme, and do they think it should be continued?
Thank you. We'll start this time with Mr May, please.
Road safety is absolutely essential. I've experienced some very similar problems working with the West of Town Community Association. We have speeding issues on Lewis Street, we have speeding issues in Kensington Place, and we have, as you can imagine there, a very densely packed area where children may be playing nearby the streets, or people are liable to walk out into the streets. We would very much like to see speed cameras there, because we have people who are using what are very small lanes and travelling again at over 40 miles an hour. I would definitely support a proposition to bring speed cameras. I think that safety of people using the pavements and using the roads is essential. When it comes to the Advance to Work scheme, I think it's a fantastic scheme. Within my office, we have had several students who've come through the scheme. They are always passionate about trying to get into work. They really value the opportunity to come into a business, and I think they value some of the mentoring that they're given both within businesses and by the specialists at Advance to Work. So yes, I'm completely in support of the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Young, please.
Absolutely. On the Advance to Work scheme, I hope there's not an implication that that scheme is under risk of being wound up, because that would be a dreadful thing. I certainly had experience as a States member whereby I managed to persuade the States to put £300,000 on the budget for coastal path maintenance because they were falling apart. And in working cooperation with the Social Security Minister, he agreed to link the Coastal Path scheme in with that scheme very successfully. And all the reports I've had have been outstanding. It was an example of cross-government work. And though that's one example, there are other sectors as well. That sort of thing is essential in government. So I would absolutely be full behind it. On Jim's question, as I said, I've got no career. I made my pitch on honesty and openness. I think something does have to be done about the increasing amount of traffic and the risks to road users as a result of people ignoring road regulations. I thought there was always a case for fixed penalties. We don't seem to have it. We don't seem to have a point system in driving licence at all. And I would certainly, speed cameras, it certainly should be one item on the agenda. I think all those things, speed cameras, fixed penalties, and a review of our licensing point signals. Because I think, you know, speeding costs lives. And I don't think we can carry on being laid back. Every day now, I travel from Leyland Avenue to town, and it's nose-to-tail traffic. And the speeding of vehicles is astonishing. It's in St Albans, we introduced a 20 limit, but it has had partial success. But certainly, I think we need to do more, make people aware.
Thank you. Mr. MEZEC, please.
On speed cameras, I will say that it's not a subject I've given a huge amount of thought to previously. People who speed, especially doing double the speed limit like that, it's a flagrant disregard for other people's safety, and frankly, it drives me mad when I witness it. It happens on a few roads near where I live in my constituency, totally out of order, and it really, really does frustrate me when I see it. In terms of would I personally bring that proposition, I'm not going to tell you I would because I'm not best placed to do it, not being an expert. What I would support happening, though, is something similar to what happened when the previous Home Affairs Minister wanted to bring in tasers, which is that he allowed a full scrutiny review to happen where they consulted with various groups from other jurisdictions about the impact that that had on crime reduction in those areas. If something were to happen to see the pros and cons of speed cameras, and the conclusion was that it would have a beneficial impact on speeding in the island, then I absolutely would support it. But I'm not going to tell you I'll bring that proposition simply because I think there would probably be other states members better placed to succeed at doing that rather than me. In terms of the Advance to Work scheme, on the whole, the scheme certainly is beneficial for the island. However, there is no doubt that there are lots of individuals who haven't had good experience with it and who probably have a rightful negative view of it because of it not necessarily being tailored to their specific needs. I wouldn't say to stop with it unless there were a better scheme ready to supplant it if it were abolished. But I think ultimately what we want is a growing economy where businesses are wanting to employ people, training them on the job, and where we're not necessarily in a situation where the government is having to constantly provide incentive after incentive for businesses to take people on. We just want a growing economy where businesses naturally want to do that. And unfortunately, we've got some way to go to that point. But any measure that would improve economic growth would have a beneficial impact for the people who are looking for work at the moment, and there's a lot of them. So, yeah, that's my view.
Thank you. Mr. Raymond, please.
Thank you, Jim. Point scheme. Cameras. Unfortunately, this is a conflict to some degree. As you probably know, there has been discussions with all the parishes because in every parish there is a road that's causing problems to everybody. Cameras is a sensible way of looking at it, but if you start putting cameras down, you then have to determine where you put the cameras. One of the suggestions that's going through at the moment, of which your Clontarf is party to as well, is that we're in discussion as to whether we bring in a point scheme very much like the UK with regards to points on licences. And the reason is, if you put points on licences, that will actually slow people down because they'll start losing their driving licence. And the big thing about it is we've got to make sure that we start losing those people if they're going to drive at speed. But the big issue also is the actual culmination of all the paperwork that goes with it if we put all these all these cameras down. And I know you're shaking your head, Jim, but this island, although small, has a lot of places that there is a lot of travelling. So in that terms, it is being looked at, and it is being looked at very seriously. And I think it's in the next round of discussions in the States as well, because it is a serious thing. When you consider there's 32,000 registered cars in this island on a population of 100,000, it's frightening. With regards to the work, the Back to Work scheme, I think it's brilliant. The problem is, what I would suggest is that some of the looking at some of the employers does need looking at, but I think the system must stay in place, and it's so beneficial to our youngsters, especially those that go through Highland and then go out through into the businesses. No, I would certainly keep it going, and it has to be supported.
Thank you. Mr. Ocean, please.
Thank you. Could I ask you a question? The area you're talking in terms of, is it used as a rat run? You know what I'm talking about now, don't you, when I say a rat run? It's not. But the speeds you're talking in terms of 40 miles an hour when it's 20, that just seems to me that that's what's happening. That's the way it seems. I mean, on the point of speed cameras, I think it's a good idea, but you've also got to talk about fixed penalties because the people that are doing this, obviously, it needs to hit their pocket. And the only way you're going to hit their pocket is to fine them. And basically, speed kills, and we all know this. I mean, the speed limit on the island is 40 miles an hour. I was involved in a car accident 21 years ago, down in St Clements Coast Road, when a car went in the back of me doing 40 miles an hour, and this is a fact. I should have been killed outright, but I wasn't. And the situation after that was that the speed limit was reduced to 30. At the end of the day, everybody's got to take into consideration other people, and they don't. So I would definitely look from the point of view of having speed cameras, but we've got to have fixed penalties. Point system, yes, is a good idea, but you've got to have deterrents put in place for people to stop being stupid, because somebody get killed and then they've got to live with that for the rest of their lives. On the points of the employment scheme, basically I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, apprenticeships are necessary for people to be placed in work at a later stage, and I believe a lot of people have been. I would actually say that there's no reason that I can see why that scheme should actually finish. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. O'Keefe-Berger, please.
Thank you, Jim. In relation to the speeding, what we actually did in St Saviour's, we did a lot of surveying with our constables officers. So what we actually did is we got the SIM machine, which you're probably familiar with. It looks like a smiley face, and it sounds really kind of quite basic. But what it actually does, it times who's speeding, what speed they're doing, 24 hours a day. So you can actually download the information and you can see where the speeders are actually in St Mary's. So you can actually narrow it down very time specific. So then what we did is, once we did that, then we targeted these times, because it was usually the same cars actually that was coming through, and we got them in and we fined them for speeding. And we found that worked very well in St Saviour's. So I don't know if that's been tried here, but I certainly think a little bit more of a target approach would probably be a good first step. Also, sometimes the problems with the speed cameras, you have to be going a long distance before it'll pick up the proper speed. If there's a bend in the road, it can not give you an incorrect reading sometimes. So, but I mean, I wouldn't be against speed cameras if this targeted practice didn't work first. I don't know if that's a help, but that would be my suggestion. In relation to the Advance to Work scheme, I've never employed somebody from the Advance to Work scheme. I like the idea in principle. I think it's a great idea. However, funnily enough this afternoon I was down in the market talking to the businesses, and there was a cafe owner, and she's had 2 problems with people from Advance to Work, and both of them, she ended up in jacks with them. And we didn't go into too many specifics, but apparently when you take somebody on, the human resources issues can be not very straightforward and quite cumbersome. So maybe that needs to be sorted.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn.
Yes, thank you. Very often the problem with dangerous roads is the actual design of the road itself. There's other points, I'm not going to repeat all the previous points, but lack of pavements, poor lighting, inadequate spaces for buses to pull in and stop. So I'm afraid the simplistic, rather cheap solution of speed cameras might sound attractive, but it's only a partial attempt at dealing with the problem, which is much more expensive. For example, you've got a traffic calming here in this parish, and I got one at St Martin's, which I don't like at all. I think it's very confusing, and I don't know how much it costs, but I would much rather have seen an attempt at making these roads one way and find some other way of doing it. Maybe not possible, but in some instances, that's the sort of solution it needs looking at. I think there are somewhat bigger design problems in most of our country roads especially. I mean, it's quite significant that, as far as I understand, poor little kid who got killed in town recently, I presume there wasn't much speed involved, but it's a charge to. So accidents happen at very slow speeds, and it isn't necessarily speeding on a 20 miles an hour zone. With regards to the Advance to Work, I'm very concerned about certain aspects of the Advance to Work, because it works in conjunction with the Social Security, cutting people's payments if they don't embark upon the scheme, and if they don't turn up for an interview and all these sorts of things, they get their payments cut. There are certain aspects about it which I think are very unsafe. I have no basic objection to trying to encourage people back to work, especially if it does lead to a genuine job at a proper rate of pay. But if it's not be a 0 hours job and all the rest of it, these are the problems. And A lot of these schemes are linked to volunteering. They want people to volunteer to go back advance to work, and if they don't volunteer to work, they might lose their social security benefits, which can cause awful social problems in a household, especially since families are very often linked as one household. If one person fails for some reason, the whole household suffers.
Thank you. Ms Ferguson, please.
Thank you. The Advance to Work scheme, I've had two experiences with it. Sometimes, I understand from business owners, the back to work workers will only take a job because if they don't, their benefit gets stopped. That's a problem. That's a cultural problem. I'm not sure how you deal with it. We've got a team of back to work people helping with the community garden project at Le Marais Flats in St Clement, and they've been doing a super job. We've God knows how many pounds of tomatoes we've just grown. We're just putting the potatoes in. Speed cameras, well, we had a complaint about Route de Noirmont, about people speeding down it. It's a 40-mile-an-hour limit, and they were complaining they were doing sort of 50, 60. So we got out, when I was a centeneer this was, and we got the speed camera out, the hairdryer out, and we were down there testing the speed. And of course, the first person we caught was the person who'd made the complaint. I know that, I don't know what they are now, but I know when it came up before, speed cameras were about £20,000 each. But slow speeds can be just as dangerous as fast ones. Speed bumps are usually effective. I'm not sure how effective you find them in St Mary. But, you know, there's a lot of road engineering we need to do. And St Albans, for instance, is a nightmare. We've got 3 zebras within 100 yards of each other, and one's on a blind corner. So really, I'm not really in favour of... no, I wouldn't bring a thing for speed cameras. I think they're overrated, because people slow down because of the speed cameras, and that's far more dangerous.
Thank you. Mr CornU, please.
They slow down in... None of us approve of speeding, of course. I wouldn't approve either of speed cameras, because I think, as in the UK, they're just used as a revenue source, and they're not really stopping the problem. Back to work. Well, we heard in the scrutiny meeting recently, it's actually being cut back because they think that unemployment is going to reduce. I'm sure that won't happen. I think it will probably increase because of the issues of Brexit and the looming recession that will come. Back to work has a dual character. It both assists people to work, but is also disciplinary. It's disciplinary on the section of the working class that doesn't have the skills to find jobs in finance. That's what it's about. And government, a right-wing government, perceives them as a problem. They want to take and save the budget. They don't want to be supporting them with income support. They therefore force them to do jobs, low-paid, low-wage jobs. Now, many immigrants are prepared to do those jobs because it's probably 4 times the wages that they would get elsewhere, where they come from, and they're keen to do it. But for many of the Jersey working class who are in that position, they don't have the skills. Many of them are, they don't have the education, but they're being forced and disciplined. That's the thing, and that's unfortunate about it. And it is associated with benefits generally. There are sanctions imposed, and they can often be very draconian. And that needs to be looked at and should be exposed for what it is.
Thank you. And then finally, for that question, Mr DeFay, please.
Personally, I consider speed cameras to be a rather old and obsolete technology. There is a solution for all this. The question is, are you, the public and road users, prepared for the new solution? Because it's quite dramatic, but simple. It would be that every road-going vehicle carries a GPS tracker, and a central computer simply logs and we'll be able to work out exactly who's been speeding and where, and identify the vehicle. So there'll be no getting out of it, day or night, wherever you are. If that's the speed and you go over it, the computer will find you out. They already have these things working on motorways in Europe. Interestingly, it offers a bigger range of opportunities. No more scratch cards. You can adjust, according to where you park the car, you can adjust the cost of parking in the street. If it's an underused street, you'll get cheaper parking. If you insist on driving down a heavily used road when other people are using it, you might put up a higher road charge on that. It's an all-purpose solution. I mentioned it once over 10 years ago to a meeting at La Pucalais, and the look on the faces of the audience is one of complete horror, which is why I've never mentioned it again until it came up just now. You never heard it from me when I was Transport Minister, but I have to say, I studied this in great detail when I was about to do a documentary program on it in London when they brought the congestion charges. It is a brilliant solution. No need for traffic wardens, it's all done by the computer. Advance to work, great idea. I'd like to see that expanded. In fact, not just work, because I notice a lot of times some of our young people seem to have messed up their education. So instead of pushing them out to work, there may be opportunities actually to do a little bit of back to school and pick up from where you left off.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you had a few more minutes to think of some more juicy questions. Yes, Mr. Bauer, please.
Good evening. We've heard a lot about expenditure tonight. All the candidates, where would you cut costs in the States? And would you lead by example, for example, pay freezes on the States members?
Thank you. And what are we going to pair that one with? If there's no parishioners, I'll allow a non-parishioner.
What are your views on the strategic plan that was agreed with in the States Chamber?
What are your views on the strategic plan as agreed?
What's your views on the strategic plan that was agreed by the States Chamber? And everyone knows me, I think. Scott.
Mr. Wickenden. Right, and we'll start this time, please, with Mr. Young.
Right, first thing, state expenditure. I used to be a chief officer until 12 years ago. I spent very little as a chief officer. I think my salary was about a third of what it is now. I am certainly horrified at what I've seen as the living beyond our means of the state's public sector. I think the fault is not the individuals, that, it's about the structure. The structure is vertically structured, and we create a situation where departments defend their budgets. And that's a result, we get these cuts in services, piecemeal. And we don't tackle the underlying inefficiencies. So where would we cut? I want to see, get rid of the silos. Budgets right across the states has been done pretty well throughout the public sector and other places, and use people efficiently and reduce our management overheads in exactly the same way that you would do in the private sector, as I did when I ran a law firm and had to avoid redundancies in staff. You have to strip your overheads back. So I think that just needs to happen. Strategic plan approved by the States Chamber. Well, I've been out of the States for 3 years, and I've been working elsewhere. So I have to confess, I don't know what that report is, but I went to the office the other day and picked up a stack of papers of states approval, and I'm wading my way through them. Half of them were the medium-term financial plan. I'm not a great fan of great big thick planning documents. I'm more interested in focus. To me, you can get a plan on one piece of paper that says what you're going to do and get a commitment and do it. Do we need, I ask, papers that thick to be able to get people to make decisions, binding decisions? I think the states have got that problem. Whoever gets elected is going to have that problem. Wading through the strategic plan that thick, and if you don't spot what's in those plans, you're told later on, we agreed this years ago. You can't change it, it's too late. So I'm not a great fan of plans, but do. Sorry, one example? Yes, I would, by example. Sorry.
Thank you. Mr MEZEC, please.
Thank you. On pay freeze for States members, it didn't make the news because it wasn't a very great story, but the States Members Remuneration Board did say that it does not want any pay increases for States members during an electoral term. If there are to be pay rises, it should only come at an election so people know what they're getting themselves in for. I agree with that. There should be no pay increases for States members. If one is offered, I will oppose it. I don't want one. I don't need one, so I won't take that. And I think States members are the last people who should be deciding how much they're paid. It should be decided completely independently. But more generally, where would I cut costs? I mentioned in my speech at the beginning that there is basically a civil service gravy train going on. We all know it. It was in Kevin Keen's report. He spoke about the culture of the top levels of the civil service. This is where we have a huge amount of managers for people who are actually doing work. And so what's the government doing? It's cutting those frontline workers, the people who are actually the best value for money in the civil service. We should be looking at cutting down on middle management and I think reducing the wages of some of the chief executives because frankly they're not worth the money, a lot of them. My views on the strategic plan, I think it wasn't worth the paper it was written on. I did lodge several amendments to the strategic plan, some of which were successful, but even with those brilliant amendments, the whole document itself was still not very good and I voted against it. The strategic plan is basically a Jersey Tory party manifesto that was written 6 months after an election, which is the wrong way round of doing it. We have governments which are elected at an election and it takes them 6 months to come up with a strategic plan. Could you imagine what would happen to a business if it went 6 months without a plan about what it was actually meant to be doing? It's a ridiculous system. I think we should abolish strategic plans altogether. Government should be elected on manifestos, which they get on with from day one, not kick it 6 months down the way and then ignore it anyway.
Thank you. Mr Raymond, please.
Thank you. So party politics is rife. Strategic plan, I'll start with. I got involved with one particular strategic plan, which is written about 10 times, and that is what you're going to do with Fort Region. If you go back to 1981, there was a strategic plan, and I know you're nodding because we went through it. There was one in 83, 85. It's amazing. You build these plans up, they just cover dust. It's like what was going to happen to Kennervay and how long it took to develop that and what they were going to do with the school. All these plans are very good. It looks good on paper. And John, for once, I will totally agree with you. The depth of them and the actual, I just find it amazing, which actually builds me into this other thing. We, as an island, employ what we are looking as the best people at the top of their job. With all due respect to the word, why the bloody hell do we have to keep going back to a consultants for the work that those people were actually brought in to do? Because every time that we get a problem, I know we're bringing consultants. If you're going to cut back, if you looked at the consultant fees over the last 10 years, I think you'd be amazed as to what we're paying consultants. I cannot believe, if these people at the top are as good as they say they are, they really do not need consultants. And I think that the first thing you need to do is to make sure that the officers in these positions are actually made to make a decision. Let's make a decision. If they make the wrong decision, fine. But at least you've got somebody to go at. If a consultant makes the decision, the chief officer stands back. I cannot believe we've got ourselves into this position. And I just really do think that we need to look at it. And as I say, with the strategic plan, they're on the back, all gathering dust. It's terrible.
Thank you very much. Mr Ocean, please.
Right, well, on the point of the strategic plan, the trouble is with things like this, that they're sort of semi-written in stone, and basically they shouldn't be, for the simple reason that so many changes are coming along, and everybody's mentioned Brexit, etc., etc. I find, I mean, I've read some of these papers, and they're endless, and they don't make much sense, and basically, at the end of the day, I think that there needs to be more diversity and flexibility in when a plan is put together, so other things can be added in at a later date. On the point of, what were we talking about? The other aspect?
The other one was cutting costs.
Right, cutting costs, yes. Well, I think that first of all, chief officers should go on EasyJet, as opposed to going on business class. And I really mean it, because I mean, that was ridiculous, £13,000 just for the sheer hell of it, and just so they could get from A to B. I mean, if I had to go to an appointment like that, I go in the back of a C-130 and save a fortune. Because at the end of the day, it's getting to the place. It's not how you get there, and it's delusions of grandeur, as far as I'm concerned. And on the point of what my colleague said here about consultants and things like that, well, basically, yes, they sit there and rub their hands together, the amount of money they do get. And in some cases, and in many cases, they're not even necessary, as you said. As far as I'm concerned, if people want to confirm things, they can confirm them with people within their own circle and not with people from the outside who will charge a fortune. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ms. O'Keefe Berger, please.
I probably have to ask you a question actually on this. The strategic plan, is that null and void when we're looking at the mid-term financial plan? Because it looks like it's got the same priorities.
The mid-term financial plan should be set by the strategic plan.
Right, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because the priorities are similar in both. And I like the idea of the aims of the priorities. But I'm worried about any new taxations. Sorry, I'm peering over my glasses, I shouldn't do that. I'm worried about any new tax, but I do think we do need to look at the corporation tax for non-Jersey businesses. I think that's quite important now, and I don't think there's anybody who would really disagree with me on that. So, but we need to see what the consequences would be of any tax changes. I personally would prefer to see the slate cleaned with some money taken out of the Strategic Reserve Fund. I'd like it put into a very good portfolio of a high investment of over 6 to 7%. I would like a loan facility based on loan to value to pay off our debts from loan to value, so we're not eating into our capital, but we're actually using the interest that is made on the capital to pay for the things that we need to do. I don't want to see any further cuts to jobs. I think, and this sort of links into the other question, what I'm seeing is the people who are losing their jobs are the people who we need, the parks and gardens attendant, people who are on lower incomes, and yet we seem to still have a top tier of management. Now, I don't want to start knocking civil servants. I don't agree with the spending that we've all heard about. Nobody does. But they have to do a job, and 9% of our population who are working in the States, and they're working for the public services. So they need to be able to get up in the morning and actually feel, worthwhile. So we need to take everything in balance. So just the two questions, really. I hope I've linked them a little bit.
Very well. Thank you. Mr. Dunn, please.
Yes, I didn't actually hear the first question very clearly, but I presume it was more than just about States members' pay, which I've always thought States members' pay ought to be linked to pensioners' pay. So there's a multiple of a pensioner's pay, and that's what the States members ought to get paid. It would just remind them where they are in the world. As far as pay freeze as such, it's all very well having a pay freeze, but then obviously you've got to link it to having none of all these extra charges putting on, and Andium putting up rents. If Andium move you out of one house for not your choice and they put you into another house and your rent goes up, all these sort of absurd things, well, you've got to have extra money to pay for those things. So you can't operate a pay freeze on everybody because they have no alternative means of supplementing their income. So pay freeze if it applies to everybody and if the other charges don't go up. The strategic plan, as far as I understand it, because there were several of these plans and I could never quite work out which was the actual one they were applying, but it used to include things, a wish list of things like to adequately house the entire population, which was complete bunkum because there was never any intention to adequately house the entire population, because you have 10,500 people straight away they're not even allowed to enjoy housing accommodation because they don't have their qualities. So it was always a bunkum, bogus strategic plan. But one thing that used to be in there, and I don't know whether it's still in there, developing Jersey's international profile. Now, I don't know if that slipped through the net or they think they've done it, but that used to be a thing, and that's the sort of thinking which got me thinking about whether this is the sort of precursor to getting ourselves independent, because we're trying to set up a dialogue. But all these things, there's one word which will sort all these things out, and it's going to be wished upon us, and it's going to happen, and it's called Brexit, because Brexit is going to potentially, it might be wonderful, it might be a great bonanza. We might have more money than we know what to do coming out of our ears again, but I don't think so. I think it's going to decimate our income. So all these questions are subject to Brexit.
Thank you. Ms. Ferguson, please.
Thank you. I think Brexit's full of great opportunities. The strategic plan is lovely and warm and fluffy. But I don't like warm, fluffy statements. I like something a bit more concrete, a little more with figures in it. What is the aim? But, I think the strategic plan could be half the length and very much more concise. I'd like something more on the lines of the 40-year projection that the Treasury Department of New Zealand produce, which does include trends, figures, and so on. You know, wordy strategic plans are something that you can always sort of fiddle with. States expenditure. Yes, well, since 2002, the population's gone up 17% and net revenue expenditure's gone up 98%. That really says it all. I mentioned the savings program earlier, where they cannot tell you how services have been improved and how the outcomes have improved. You know, the current reform plan really isn't working. The whole point about a systems review, which is what they're doing in the States, is that the greater efficiency leads automatically to reduced costs. If you do your efficiency review properly, then your costs will fall out automatically. This is a fact. It has been proven. It does require senior managers to find out exactly how jobs are being done, which a lot of them don't. You know, you think you know, but in actual fact, when you're down on the shop floor talking to the people doing the job, you find out that, oh dear, that's not what I thought. But anyway, we need to do a proper reform programme.
Thank you. Mr. CORNU, please.
States members receiving a salary is part of the extension of democracy in Jersey. It's a bit like universal suffrage. It's like the right of women to vote. It's important that states members should not be drawn simply from the gentlemen of England, the property-owning classes, that, as it was, say, in the 18th or 19th century, but now in the 21st, ordinary working people can put themselves forward. The great hero is, of course, Norman LeBrock, who famously went round and was supported by people giving him 5 shillings, and Mr. Dunn did that. I think you're asking the wrong question about cutting costs of the states. Actually, the problem is it's not raising enough revenue to meet the demands and needs of the island. It's the failure of the 0-10 policy. It's the problem of the finance centre. We're not raising enough revenue. We have to find new mechanisms to do so. Companies are not paying tax. Who is low and middle income earners are. The middle class is going to feel it increasingly. That is why the government is desperately trying to cut back budgets. It's going to fail because the demands and needs are so great. Theresa May, her first speech as Prime Minister, was that to tell the working people of Britain austerity is finished. I don't believe her, but let's see. It does mean there's a change of policy coming, and perhaps the Council of Ministers should listen to that as well, because there's going to be a major recession following Brexit, I suspect, and the island will need to respond to that.
Thank you. Mr. DeFay.
Well, I was a minister on the first Council of Ministers when we did the first strategic plan. It was an enormous body of work to undertake. No one had done one before. The departments were all stretched to the limit, but we got it in within the 6 months. Consequently, I was completely amazed when after the next general elections, the next Council of Ministers threw the original strategic plan out the window and did the entire operation all over again. Completely ridiculous. The concept of the strategic plan was to lay down a basic blueprint of this is what the state is going to go. The public can look at it and see what's happening. And if you want to tweak a bit of it, fine. Have a debate about that section, take it out and put a new one in. Then we all know where we stand. But no, we get a new rewrite every flipping time we get a new Council of Ministers. It's shambolic. It's a waste of everybody's time and effort. And am I impressed by the last strategic plan? No. By contrast to the one that I was involved in, it's pathetic. It's a pathetic effort by a, frankly, not very good Council of Ministers if we're like checking track record. Now, cutting costs. Crikey, well, here's a wide open source of... But before we start knocking states members' salaries, should we just have a look around at what's happening now? We've got all these quangos, Ports Authority, Andium Homes, Visit Jersey. Each one's got a chairman, sit on the board of directors, 40,000 a year, bunch of non-executive directors, not elected by you, but experts, 10,000 a year, helped out by a chief officer or executive, £140,000 a year. Do those people need pay freezes? Do they even notice? No. The way to cut costs in public services, reduce differentials, stop paying the people at the top more money, 1% across the board, and start giving a bit more to the people at the bottom and in the middle.
Thank you. And winding up those questions, can we have Mr. May, please?
Well, I'm not going to be a kamikaze candidate and say my first proposition will be to raise states members' pay, because that would be completely insane. I am in favour of the pay being frozen, remaining where it is. I think it's at a sensible level. Looking at how we can make savings, one thing we've got to do is consolidate. We've got to bring the state's departments together, both physically in an office space that would allow better interaction between departments, but also getting rid of the silo mentality, the individual budgets. We also need to bring data together. The state holds over 2 million records on the just over 100,000 people on the island. It's ridiculous. It leads to duplication and it leads to inefficiency. If we can start bringing the data together, we can actually reduce the time that people spend on different tasks and reduce the costs. We also do need to cut down on external consultants and actually trust in the people in the civil service with the ministers to make decisions. Looking at the strategic plan, it's laudable. Who wouldn't want to see improvement in education, in healthcare in St Helier? We do need the best healthcare that allows people to be treated with respect. We need an education system that gets people into university, gets them into vocational qualifications, and we need our town infrastructure invested in. But I want to see the action. Where is the investment now in St Helier? Why aren't we seeing improvements to roads, to the open spaces? Where's the investment in schools for English as a second language and those dealing with autism? And where's the investment in the hospital healthcare that we've been promised and bringing that in line with digital innovation? It's great. It's great to have a strategy. I want to see the tactics and the action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, St Mary's parishioners, let's get back to another question. Who's got one? Just wait. Have we got a parishioner first, then we can... Any parishioners? Mr Cronin, then.
Good evening. Jason Cronin, question. We've seen in the last year the effects of barricity on travel links to Jersey, which is through weather. We've seen Condor fail time and time again to get to the island and get islanders out of the island. We've also, my question to you is, what would you do, what policies would you bring in to improve the sea links to Jersey? Would you offer it to any other companies, and which ones would you potentially offer it to? And also at Jersey Airport, how do you increase Jersey Airport's efficiency and with the empty times? Because sometimes there is 1 or 2 hours with no flights coming in or out. What do you think you could suggest happens to the air links in Jersey as well? Thank you.
Right, who'd like to partner up that question with another one? I'll try and have one parishioner if we can in each round. No, definitely no St Mary's parishioners want to ask? Mr Pearce, then.
Darius Pearce. After Brexit, Sir Philip said that his preference would be for the status quo to be maintained, and if not, independence for Jersey. Clearly, the only thing that is not going to happen is that the status quo is going to be maintained. So therefore, are the candidates in favour of independence for Jersey or not?
Right, candidates, we'll start this time with Mr MEZEC, please.
Thank you, Jason. On travel, it was in the news recently, the Economic Development Minister saying that with hindsight, one of the mistakes they had made was allowing just one ferry to do that route with the Liberation. Hindsight is always 20/20. It's a shame that decision wasn't made. I wonder about the viability of Condor in the future when they've clearly made what we all now realise is a massive mistake with taking the particular type of ship they have, when it's so unreliable and is causing us such problems. To rectify that is going to cost a huge amount of money for them and will affect their viability as a company. So how they can fix that, whatever it is, we need to make sure that the government's right at the seat on that discussions, doing whatever we can to support them to make sure we keep our vital sea links going. And in terms of the airport, instead of spending this 65 million quid to give us a new arrivals hall, which I'm not absolutely convinced we need, how about putting some of that money towards reducing the landing fees so that we can make it cheaper to come to this island? That'll benefit tourism, it'll benefit local islanders who want to go travel elsewhere, and will be good for business links as well. I think that should be a higher priority rather than building this fancy new arrivals hall when the one we've got right now is really good. I've used it recently, great experience, I don't see the problem. On Brexit and independence, I categorically say, here and now, as somebody who was born in Jersey and who both of my parents were born in Jersey, there is no force on heaven or earth that could ever convince me to support independence. I am incredibly proud to be a Jerseyman. I'm also incredibly proud to be British. I never want to see our links with the UK cut off. I really actually resent what I think is a very clear view of Senator Balash, which is that he clearly wants the island to be independent. He's gone on about it a lot of times. He headed up a review looking into the viability of it. If that's what he wants, let's have that discussion in the open rather than doing things behind closed doors. But I'm completely against independence under any circumstances.
Thank you. Mr. Raymond, please.
I wish I had longer to discuss this with you. I've spent half my time over the last 3 months going backwards and forwards to Guernsey, talking to the politicians over there as well as the sporting groups. There is no doubt that we have a real problem. The amazing thing is, which I didn't realise, that Jersey states had signed up to the agreement with Condor. Guernsey actually didn't sign. But the problem is, if you take Condor out, that leaves Guernsey out on its own. Its new chief executive was a deputy, as you know, in Guernsey, and has some ideas, but the boat is not fit for purpose. I think everybody's realising that now. And it's so much easier with regards to travelling that if you know how long it's going to take, you will accept it, providing the boat travels. The problem is we've got Liberation at the moment, which is not travelling. We had 2 boats there originally. It was quite happy. We had the Clipper in the evening. Everybody was happy. If you wanted to go overnight, that was the way of doing it. What worries me is that we've invested so much money into it now, I'm not sure how the states are going to get out of it. The other thing is that the boat sat for 5 years in Tasmania. It did nothing. It just sat there. It couldn't even do the Tasmanian Sea, which is less than the English Channel. And so we agreed to it. I'm not sure what we do. The other thing is the Guernsey situation with regards to the flight patterns are unbelievable, because Guernsey's getting less and less places to go to. We're lucky. We're very lucky. We've got to maintain that. The other thing is, which I can say now, there's a lot of discussions going on because of the inter-island flights, which are costing so much money. There are actually large companies deciding whether they should move from Guernsey to Jersey or the other way around. And I'm sorry I haven't got time for the Brexit thing. The only thing that I will say, which I'm finding very difficult, is somebody mind telling me what independence mean? Are we part of UNIT? Are we part of Europe? Are we not? What are we doing? I'm not clear exactly where Jersey sits, but it must be independent.
Thank you. Mr. Ocean.
Thank you. Well, on the point of view of your question here, Josh, about sea links, I think the only way to actually get Condor and give them a good kick up the backside is to get another carrier in, somebody like Brittany Ferries. Basically, this would be a situation that I could see that if a reliable carrier comes on board, it's going to force Condor to do something about the situation, because we've got a real grey elephant here and it's not doing this island any good. It's doing it a lot of damage. On the point of the airport, basically I think we should get around the table with all the airlines and decide between ourselves if we can come to some agreement to give seats away. And that would encourage people to come to the island as well. We've got to look at reduced costs. On the point of Brexit, and I don't know if you know this, but the pound is equivalent to 99 euros. 99 euros. That's under £1. That's ridiculous, and that's never been known. And I saw that today, and I was quite shocked. Yeah, that's true. So the situation, as far as the other part of it, I was going to say, which is independence. Look, the thing is that we're not part of the UK. There's all these arguments and everything else, and there's confusion about all sorts of things, about some of the websites over here, like the police. The police website actually is illegal because it actually should say jerseypolice.je, not jerseypolice.co.uk. If that's not confusing, what is? Now, that's absolutely true. As far as independence is concerned, if we don't get a deal that is congenial with ourselves and we're going to lose out, it's an option that we have to really and truly think about. We've got no option other than that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. O'Keefe-Berger, please.
Thank you. Under my legit strategies, under tourism, and I call good housekeeping, which is where I class the economy, I have written up about our sea links and our air links, which are, quite frankly, at the moment very poor. Excuse me. Before I lived in Jersey, I lived up in Orkney, and just to remind you, they're the islands on the very, very top of Scotland. And we had a ferry service, and that ferry service ran. And there was days you would want that ferry service not to run. It was so rough because where we were, the Atlantic meets the Baltic Sea, and the tides were phenomenal. But that ferry went day in, day out. It was reliable, it was bumpy, but it went. Now, what Orkney actually did is they had an arrangement with Scotland, the Scottish Parliament, and because the ferry services and the flights are a lifeline service, they managed to have it very well subsidised. And this is something that I think that we should be looking at because, you know, our links to the global economy, to the outside world for tourism, they're so important. And we are not really global yet. We don't have a link to Heathrow. That's not making us global. We don't have a ferry service that works. So I would go for Northlink ferries, the most robust, hardy, seaworthy boat that there possibly is. So then when we come back to the question of independence, I think this is a very big question just to answer in 5 minutes. I'm one of these people that likes to take an intellectual approach to any question. I want to see what would happen if we said we were going to go independent, what would the consequences would be, because we know the consequences, staying as we are is fine, and that works, and I wouldn't want to do anything to jeopardise our brilliant island.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn, please.
Well, regarding the second question, obviously if you elect me, you'll get the opportunity to discuss all these issues. And over the next 6 months or so, you'll be able to join my Brexit group and you can analyse these things. Unfortunately, Senator Balash rests his status quo argument on the he's hoping that Protocol 3 will stand up. Unfortunately, Protocol 3, who owns Protocol 3 these days, nobody knows. Nobody knows who can discuss it or change it or interfere. Nobody knows who owns it. So it might be Jersey, it might be the UK, it might be European Union. And bear in mind, Protocol 3 applies to Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man, 3 islands with 3 totally different situations. They were agreed to it in 1974 because they were questions weren't asked. It would be almost impossible to find a similar arrangement which will suit all 3 islands today. So obviously, the simple answer, and I thank Darius for, I totally agree with what's been said at the end there. I'm totally opposed to independence, but if at the end of the day there was a referendum in Jersey and the public wanted it, we'll have to go along with it. But we'll have to go along with it, rather unlike the UK government, which has had a referendum and they've decided to come out, and then now it sounds like they more or less want to go back in again. So with regards to the other question, which was about travel, of course, travel has got all sorts of international dimensions, and I'm sorry to say you're going to finish out with the Brexit problem again because these things are not ours to determine. Again, they're for Jersey in the United Kingdom, France, and there's international rules and bodies that have say on international travel. So these things are going to get much more complicated over the next few years. Yes, we desperately need more ferry services, different, diverse, but look at the numbers. It used to be that Jersey Airport, the busiest airport in the United Kingdom, they used to say, not anymore. Why? Because the demand is not there. And that's one of the other problems. But I'm afraid my little pet hobby horse is not going to help you.
Thank you. Ms. Ferguson, please.
Okay. Thank you. Transport links. Yes, our airport was one of the busiest in the UK. But in fact, that was because there was so much private flying. I know because I was one of them. The airport the passenger traffic currently does not justify the £65 million expenditure. It's pie in the sky. Far better to look at reducing some of the taxes that are paid and that are imposed on passengers. As far as the sea, we ought to also be looking at new links, air links with Alderney, which would make life easier for John. And also maybe, bring Stansted online, because there's a lot of holidays, international holidays go from Stansted, and that's actually quite a nice airport. Condor, the harbour at the moment isn't big enough for the sort of boats that Brittany Ferries would want. We ought to, I think, probably revert to boats like the Clipper, but the Clipper, I think, was made specially for this run. But yes, we perhaps ought to look at, I hate to say it, ought we to own our steamship company? The Isle of Man actually own the Isle of Man steamship company, which goes in all weathers, and that is an awful trip. Our links to the UK are extremely useful. The UK will be standing alone instead of 1/28th part of representation on various bodies, and I think to keep the links is extremely important. For instance,
foiled.
Thank you. Mr. Cornu, please.
I think the Mariner candidates have dealt well enough with the issue of the sea links and air links. I'd like to specialise on the issue of independence, because I think it's very crucial to the political situation in Jersey. Kuwait is an independent state. It was carved off by the British from Iraq after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, and they set up the local chieftains as a monarchy. Kuwait, of course, is just an oil field with a flag. There's great danger for independence in Jersey. Jersey would just be a finance centre with a flag. Now, that, of course, is what our elites would love. Why? Because it means they're not accountable. They're not accountable. Remember, 70% of the island doesn't vote, so there's no accountability. It would just be a very small electorate and keeping them perpetually in power. But that English connection ensures that there is oversight in what happens in the islands. You've seen Lord Carswell's report, which was the British government saying to the Jersey authorities, boys, it's time to, gentlemen, I'm sorry, it's time to reform and modernise. You saw the example of Sark with the Barclay brothers. That was the British government at one time pressing for a reformed model in the Channel Islands. And the States itself is a product of the British intervention. It was a popular uprising in the 28th of September 1768, led to the intervention of a British regiment who was brought over, and the colonel realised it wasn't an uprising and revolution, it was a popular demand for rights, and he introduced the 1771 Code of Laws. Well done, the Brits. They modernised, democratised Jersey, as the Ancien regime in the 18th century was capable of doing. Pity they lost America.
Thank you. Mr. DeFay, please.
I apologise for being candid, but I have to say we've now hit the time where the people of this island just have to wake up and smell the coffee. Because for years you have been conned with PR and spin over our so-called maritime links. It's okay, we have a service level agreement in place. Those service level agreements are not worth the paper they're written on. If they were, something would have been sorted out already. So there's your clue. They're a complete con. And why? Because take Condor out of the equation, who are you left with? No one. No one is the slightest bit interested in bringing alternative ferry arrangements here because it's next to impossible to make any money. Look what happened to HD ferries. Look what happened to Channel Island ferries. The only successful ferries are run by British Rail. courtesy of the UK government sloshing loads of money into the pot. And by the way, they brought thousands of British Rail employees on holiday to this island. That's when the tourism industry started going down the pan, when Sea-Link stopped. The only short-term solution is some logistics to perhaps put the Liberation disaster boat on the France run instead of trying to push it across the channel. And the long-term solution will have to be sitting down with Guernsey and getting our act together jointly. And probably having our own Channel Island boat is probably a good start, a reliable, something like the Havlet. Airlines, by the way, similar story. Fly maybe, etc. You're paying thousands into that just to keep them tickled up and coming here. As for independence, well, we might have to look at it, because let me say this. At some point, we're going to have to say, do we keep allowing people come from the UK anytime they like, right to work, right to live? How long is that going to last when our population gets bigger and bigger? It's going to be something to look at.
Thank you. Mr. May, please.
You can't sugarcoat it. The situation with Condor is a disgrace, and we need to look at the viability of the operator. It has an effect on tourism. We're losing £500 for every tourist who doesn't make it to the island. It has an effect on families, people going to university, and obviously has an effect on business. We need more resilience on the routes, and we need cost savings for travellers. And I think one of the few ways to do that is either to find another operator who will join the route and act as some real competition to Condor, or we do then have to look at working within the Channel Islands at our own operator. As far as the airport goes, there is potential with the airport. We missed out on the private registry of planes at the airport to Guernsey, but there is an opportunity, and I know it's being discussed, to look at bringing a flight college and an ancillary training college to Jersey. Imagine then the amount of diversification in the economy we could get if we had those extra people learning about the aircraft industry in Jersey, and also that would drive more operators to come to Jersey and offer more routes. When it comes to the relationship with the United Kingdom, Jersey has a very peculiar and very intrinsic relationship with the United Kingdom. I wrote my dissertation on it. We're linked via the economy, we're linked via our laws, and we're linked emotionally to the United Kingdom. And I would not want to see that relationship to be diminished or destroyed. And we just don't know at the moment what the risks would be. What would be the risks to our population policy? What would be the risk to our economy? And what would be the risk to industry? So I say that independence is not the right route at this current time.
Thank you. And finally, for these particular questions, Mr. Young.
Thank you. Picking up Sarah's point, one of the benefits of my last 15 months working life, travelling between the islands, is that I think I've become a bit of an expert in transport links. I think I've travelled on just about every means possible, even the freight boat. And of course, what it's also shown me is the crucial nature of the importance between transport links and our economy. Absolutely number one, and I've seen it. When transport links don't work, your economies die and your communities die. Jersey now, I think you guys right. If ever there's a case for finding a solution here, it's inter-island cooperation. Jersey on its own, I don't think can find the right formula. We have to work with Guernsey. We have to, because I can tell you now, I believe from people I've spoken to in Guernsey, there is a low level of confidence that under the new management they can sort out the Guernsey side on their own. So I think clearly mistakes were made. The only solution is to pull all that together. Jersey's very lucky, in my view, with the quality of our air links. I can tell you now in Guernsey, there is a strong wish to see Jersey used as a Channel Islands hub, supported by inter-island links of both sea and air. Efficiency and money, because Guernsey's hemorrhaging money on the Orkney air services. They're hemorrhaging 5 to 10 million a year. They've had to write off over 30 million. They've got an airline that they can't sell. And the people of Guernsey have to pay much higher airfares than we do. Now, it's not a plea for Guernsey. We can't solve our problems on our own. So working together. Now, Brexit, well, We do. One of my suggestions was that I think Brexit, we have to have a working group. Yes, I agree. And I think it should include the best experts in the private sector to look at this. I don't like the idea. My feeling is against independence. It's about commitment to I want to see commitment to the Crown, defence, security. So I'm troubled about that. A working group, please.
Thank you, candidates. Now, the meeting is scheduled to finish at about 9:30, and by my reckoning, it's about 9:30. And based on the fact that it was quite hard to get the last couple of questions out of you, I'm assuming that everybody is happy to adjourn at this time. Right. In that case, I'd like to thank the candidates for coming. I've been on this trail myself. I can tell you it's grueling, it's tiring, and it's for the newcomers, it's nerve-wracking. So I think well done to all the candidates for putting forward their ideas so clearly. And it just remains for me to thank you for all coming, especially the parishioners that are here, and to urge everyone, as has been said by one of the candidates, please play your part and use your vote. Thank you.